Hi, my name is Weakley. A little while ago, I had an opportunity to learn how to fly paramotors with AviatorPPG, and today I want to tell you that story. Starting chronologically, Saturday is when I arrived, kind of late morning-ish, and right after I got there, we went out into the lake, and I went over with James Farewell, who is Eric Farewell's brother. Winds were kind of high, and so we took out a speed wing, and I started to practice kiting. So you bring it up above your head, and you control it, make sure it doesn't overshoot you. You run with it so that you can see what it'll feel like when it starts giving you lift, and then sometimes the person that's with you can actually push you from behind, and you can get some air. And so that was a lot of fun. Apparently I was doing really well for someone who had just started. But after that, we had lunch and hung around until sunset. And then at sunset, we all went out to the airfield. The wind had calmed down. And so a bunch of the students went out to fly. And I was on the ground with Joe Farewell, Eric and James's other brother. And I had an opportunity to use a bigger glider so I could see what it would feel like to kite something much bigger than the speed wings. And I did that for a while. You can see me in the green paraglider here. It was a lot of fun for sure. And Joe pushed me around a little bit, so I had a chance to get up in the air for a little bit. But looking at the people who were flying around me, some of the students and Eric flying around, I kept on thinking to myself, like, how am I going to do this? Like, it felt so daunting to me at that moment, and I was kind of nervous about continuing with the training. I was like, why am I here? Because it was kind of scary. I didn't know what it would feel like to fly into the air really quickly, the way that these people were taking off with the motors on their back. The motors kind of seemed scary, at least initially for me, just because like I didn't know how the power was going to work. It was a lot of unknowns, and I was nervous about that. And we had a meeting at the end of the day, and all the guys and some of the students came together and they were talking about what they did during the day. And I kind of expressed some of my fears about continuing, and they were all really super reassuring. And it was definitely helpful to have their support. But in the morning, I kited some more when everyone else went flying. So I got some more training with the glider, learned the controls a little bit more. And then in the middle of the day, we went out and did the motor simulator, which is just a big swing set. You get tied in with the motor on your back, you're all strapped in, and you go through the steps of a full flight. So you go through the takeoff, the powering up for that, the flaring to get off the ground, and then stowing the brake on one side to get into your seat. And then once you're in the seat, then you can stow both brakes and put your hands on your lap with the throttle control, practice throttle control. And then when you come back to land, you're getting out of the seat, so pushing yourself forward and then getting ready to flare, but you've also killed the power before. And so you go through all of these different steps. You feel what full throttle feels like on your back. You feel what like all these different things are. And then you take the motor off of that and you go walk around with the motor so you feel how heavy it is. It's about 50 pounds, and you lean back into it. So you get to experience the power of it and you get to trust the motor. And then all during this, I'm in the radio with a helmet and a headset on, and the instructor's telling me to, like, out of nowhere, just like kill it, because you're practicing the kill. And that's the big thing, the kill switch. So just in case something happens and they want you to kill the motor, then you're practicing that reflex. Because all during this, they're telling you to be a robot. They want you to be a robot because you will not be able to make the decisions on your first flight because you're going to be too nervous. And I was like, okay, I'll be a good robot. I'm basically like an RC vehicle and they're my controller, I guess. So, and then later in that evening, we went out again and I went kiting. I was more focused on now the controls of like what it was going to be like the takeoff, what I would do with the glider to do that, coming down and landing, being pushed and flare, and then controlling the glider, kind of turning it on the ground. So that was Sunday. And then Monday morning, we went out early. The students went flying, and so did some of the instructors. But then I was on the ground and we did towing. So the way that it would work is they had this big winch. They put it through a pulley on a car down the field and then back onto you in a harness. You're tied into the glider and you do a forward launch. And so they are on the radio with you and they tell you everything that you have to do. And basically they turn on the winch and they draw you forward, and the glider comes up above you, and then once it's above you, then you flare a little bit so that you take off, and this is the first time I'm up at like 50 feet in the air. Like this first time, I was actually really nervous because I had never been up that high, and I didn't know, like, I didn't have all that trust that I had in the equipment yet. So I was kind of nervous listening to him, and the big thing is that you have to listen to the instructor, and Eric is talking me through this right now, and you have to listen to him on when to flare. And flaring is like coming in and it's pulling up at the last minute, and you're basically stalling the glider to set you down going at no speed. So then you can walk it off. And what's important is if you flare too early, then you stall, lose all your forward momentum, and you'll fall. And I didn't want to do that, so I was just waiting for the flare for him to tell me. And so getting pulled violently kind of up into the air 50 feet, and then you all of a sudden all the force is gone because the winch is turned off, and then you start tilting forward because the wing overshoots you. It's going faster than you now, and now you're coming at the ground pretty quickly. And then I'm just waiting for the flare, and he's telling me don't flare, don't flare, don't flare. And then I finally flare at the last minute, and it was a little bit too late on my first one, and so I kind of like slipped because I wasn't able to get my feet under me fast enough, and then I landed and the wing overshot me, so I was like, ah. And but it was good because I got over that initial fear. And so we went back, set it all up again, and I did it again, and it went better the second time, and we did it like 7 more times, 7 times in total. And it was a lot of fun. By the end of it, I was able to land on my feet, turn around, kite the glider back down, and set it down on the ground. And it was a lot of fun. And so at that point, these 2 simulators really showed me like what to do, and they made the nerves kind of go away because I knew what it was going to feel like to have the motor on me. I knew what it was going to feel like when I took off, and it just wasn't scary for me anymore. So that evening we kited a little bit more, but mostly it was just me getting kind of more mentally prepared to do my first flight, which they didn't tell me anything or when it was going to happen, but I knew it was going to happen the next morning just because of the amount of what I've already done, and I was basically ready. So I went to sleep, I wasn't too nervous, and got up, still nothing, and then when we got out to the field, they were like, okay, you're going to fly today. I was like, fine. So I was about to do my first flight after only being there for 3 days. And the thing that they do is they try to mitigate your nerves. They try to prevent you from thinking about it too much. And so they're setting up the glider, they're getting the motor set up, it's all warmed up, they're telling me what to do, and they're kind of keeping me occupied the whole time so I'm not getting nervous or thinking about it too much. And then basically as soon as we got there, I'm already strapped into the motor and I'm already strapped into the glider. And before they turn on the motor on my back, Eric is telling me, okay, so this first flight, or this first thing, we're not even going to fly. What we're going to do is we're going to taxi. So I'm going to turn on the motor. You're going to hold everything like you would if you take off, hold all the lines and stuff. You're going to run forward, you're going to bring the wing above your head, and then you're going to give it a little bit of power so you can feel what it feels like, control the glider a little bit, so taxi it around on the ground, and then you'll kill the power and put it back on the ground, and then we'll take off, doing the first flight after that. And I was like, okay, cool. And he starts up the motor on my back, and then he steps back, gets ready, and he goes on the radio and he's like, yeah, and if everything looks good, I'll tell you to go full power and you'll take off. And I'm like, what? And then he's like, okay, run towards me. And so we just start and like holding up the A's, running. I'm bringing the wing above me. There's a tiny bit of a headwind, so it's a little bit hard to bring it up. And it's finally above me, release the A's and giving it power. So he's like, okay, more power, full power, lean back. And I'm leaning back as I'm giving more power, but I'm kind of like still nervous about the power. And he's like, full power. And then so I have full power, and it's enough that I'm starting to get all my weight lifting off of me, and I'm flying. And then it was just climbing incredibly quickly once I laid on the full power. And so that for the first flight, everyone's on the ground. They're kind of like a little bit nervous. They want to make sure that the air is clear for me so that I have plenty of space to do whatever I want. And so I do a couple circuits, and it's a little bit windy up there, and I'm at like 400 or 500 feet. And coming in to do my landing, I'm over this river that's coming into the runway, or this green patch that I'm gonna land. And I have a headwind, and I'm giving it power, and my airspeed is as fast as the wind, so my ground speed is 0. So I'm stuck. It's what's called paraparked. Like, I'm kind of nervous about this. Of course, there's wind too, and so there's a little bit of turbulence, and basically just this first flight is trying to get over your nerves. So while I'm up there too, Eric is having me let out the trims, stow both brakes, and relax, have my hands free, turn with my legs, getting all these things out of the way that could be potentially scary down the road on my first flight, so then I won't ever be afraid of them again. So to get out of that paraparked, all you have to do is let off some power, so I start to descend and pick up some speed. And so I'm coming in, and I'm still up at that altitude, 400 or 500 feet, and he's like, okay, you're gonna come in for a landing, go ahead and give it to idle power and kill power, so kill the engine. And so I'm I killed the engine. It's totally silent. All I can hear is the wind coming by, and it's still really high up and on my brakes. And he's like, okay, we're gonna do a landing. You look great. And we're coming in, and he's telling me to, okay, get out of your seat once I come low enough. And he's like, wait for me to say flare, wait for me to say flare, don't flare yet, don't flare yet. And just waiting and waiting and waiting. He's like, okay, slow, slow, light pressure, okay, full flare. And then on my feet, turn around and kite the glider back down. And it was a great feeling. Just getting over that first flight, it was a lot of fun. And then everyone came over and congratulated me for it. And it was a great experience. And I wanted to go back up again.
Fantastic, son. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thanks. I had a feeling you might want to go again.
So I was super excited to get back up. The guys set up the wing for me again. They started the motor again for me. And then I did another takeoff and it was perfect. And I flew around for like 8 or 9 minutes at that point. Everyone else was flying around too. And so I got to fly around with some of the guys in the air too. And then coming in for another perfect landing, which was great. It was a perfect first experience. It was a perfect first day of flying. And then later in that day, it was too windy to go out. And so we just stayed in. So Wednesday morning, we went back out. There was no wind, so it was kind of tricky to take off. I was able to get one takeoff, fly around for a little while, and it was fun to putt around. And that was the first time I had a GoPro on me too, so I got some footage of that flight. Then I had a couple failed takeoffs, which was not fun. So taking off, the wind wasn't there. It was really hard to inflate the glider, so it wasn't getting over my head symmetrically, so it fell over twice. And then I was able to finally get it up level and start flying and about to take off on the last one. And then I had a pretty bad failed launch where I was running and then I was up to speed. A lot of the weight was taken off my shoulders and on the backpack. And then I kind of slipped and tripped at the same time, which meant that I slowed down and the wing continued forward. So I lost all the lift that I was getting. So all the weight came back onto me and I felt like I was going to trip. So I killed it.
Yeah, it was my fault.
And that was almost at takeoff speed too. So it was really nerve-wracking that had happened, and it could have been a lot worse, but I was able to like use my instincts and do that, even though it was only my second day. But I kind of called it at that. I didn't want to do any more flights and I didn't want to break anything. And the conditions weren't good enough for me to fly. So then that evening, it was too windy kind of, but we still went out. And I got to do one flight and it went really well. And then I came back down and it was pretty windy at that point and it was getting closer to sunset. And I brought the wing up, but it was a little bit too strong. So I got a chance to do a reverse launch, which means that you pull it from behind you and then turn around and take off. And that was a good experience to have, just to do it. And then coming in for that landing, I was coming in over a fence and then I turned onto the patch of grass that I was going to land on, and I accidentally started some oscillation and I wasn't able to correct it before I came in. So I kind of came in sideways and forward at the same time. So I tripped a little bit and I landed on my knees, and then the wing fell behind me and it grabbed some of that gusting wind and it knocked me on my back. And so I turtled. Basically, I couldn't get up unless someone helped me up because of the motor on my back, unless I unstrapped from it. And everything was okay. I cracked one motor mount on it, but the frame had already been damaged a little bit before and it needed to be repaired, so it was fine. But anyway, it was a good laugh and they took a lot of pictures of me when I was on the ground. So then Thursday morning, I had 3 flights and I was focusing more on technique now with Travis Burns, who's another instructor over there at AviatorPPG. And he was showing me different techniques on taking off and leveling out before I climbed up to like 500 feet, staying over the runway at a certain altitude and keeping that altitude using throttle control. I did some harder turns and banks. And then coming into land, I practiced more on my ability to kind of reset the glider, to put it down symmetrically so that I could just take off again instead of having to fold or lay out the glider again. So that was a really good experience. And then I also flew into a cloud on accident, which was fun. Then Thursday evening, it was a little bit too windy for us to fly. We still went out just in case it kind of died down, but it didn't. And so we kind of just enjoyed the sunset. Amelia Plack was there, which was kind of cool. She was visiting AviatorPPG at the time, and she is a champion Polish paramotor pilot. and she's been visiting from Europe, and she had recently just gotten a new prototype wing from Ozone, and they were playing around with it, Bastion and her, kiting in the higher winds. And that was it, because on Friday morning, the guys were leaving out to go to a fly-in, and they didn't want to wake up early to go fly because they had to pack up and stuff like that. So I thought that was it. That was my last time to go fly. So I was kind of welcoming the sleeping in part too. But I go to bed, and I'm in my room, and then in the morning I hear this knocking on the door, and it's like, Lucas, do you want to go fly? And Bastion, who's one of the instructors over there, he's from South Africa. He came by in the morning even though he didn't have to, and he came out just by himself, and he took me out to the field to fly, and I got 2 more flights in, and I'm super grateful that he did that for me, because that brought my total up to 10 flights for that entire time. When I was doing those flights, I was kind of practicing in no wind conditions again, so that was like my arch nemesis from Wednesday, and I was able to do it with, I think I had 1 failed launch, but it was fine because I took off with it, and I was able to use the power to my advantage and kind of work on those techniques to take off. And I also got a chance to fly with Amelia with her new wing, which was really cool, and she was much faster than me with my beginner wing. But it was a lot of fun, great way to end the entire experience, and totaling 10 flights, it was fantastic. So then we went back, and I helped them pack up for the fly-in. I actually did go see them at the fly-in, which was kind of neat. I went there for a day, and there was a lot going on, a lot of people flying. I didn't want to fly there because there was just too many people, but it was cool to see like everyone in the industry that was in Florida flying at Paramotors. So in 3 days, I was able to do my first flight, and in the remaining 4 days that I was there, I did 10 more flights. And this was over spring break, and I went back a couple weeks ago, and I did 2 flights, 2 cross countries, and that was a lot of fun. I did some of them with Bastion and James, and we went out and saw some fields, and it was really cool to go a distance. And then the second one that I did there, I got into an intermediate wing, so I was using a faster wing, which was a lot of fun, and just building my skills more and more, and getting comfortable with not hearing as much instruction, and eventually moving up to the point where I can take off and land by myself, and then I can be comfortable with my own equipment and go fly wherever I want. So I wanted to thank AviatorPPG for such a great experience. It was a lot of fun, a great way to spend my spring break, and I will definitely remember it forever. If you want to check out more about them, I've linked them in the description. Also, they did an interview with me right after my first flight, so you can kind of see what my thoughts were right after I did my first flight, and there'll be a link somewhere here, so you can check that out. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Well, I've always wanted to fly, and I've been working towards a pilot's license, but something in between that I can do during college, I was looking for something that I could actually do without spending too much money. And so